Hey, welcome everyone. Hey, this podcast is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspectives, societal impacts, and or related topics. This podcast often features discussions with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I'm your host, Al Richards, and today with our amazing guest, who I'm really excited to have on the show today, is Alan. And in this episode today, we're going to be talking about a wide range discussion about Alan's journey and why the TC model, in his opinion, is the very best weapon there is to combat the addiction crisis. Alan, man, I've been looking forward to this day for a couple of weeks. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thank you. You know, just so our listeners know, I don't know if they understand what you mean by the TC model.
Well, TC is just the acronym for Therapeutic Community. And the Therapeutic Community model that's been around for a long, long time, since I think it began with Synanon way back in the day, and has developed since then. But the Therapeutic Community model is different than the psychosocial model where psychotherapy is involved. I would call it change from the inside out, where you basically try to go back inside in your past to whatever the source of your trauma and whatever the source of your difficulty is that has fed your addiction or has held you back. A TC is sort of the opposite. It's change from the outside in. Behavior modification versus psychotherapy. This sort of act as if until you become. Practice a behavior until it's not just what you know, but it's actually who you are. And I think that's an awesome model for so many people that suffer with addiction. Not for everybody, but for so many of just the garden variety knuckleheads like myself that just for whatever reason got off the beaten path, generally at an early age, and they just got so far out in the weeds that they weren't able to find their way back. If you put them in an environment where it's an each one teach one sort of philosophy, somebody that's been there a little longer than you can teach you what they've just learned, and then you in turn will teach the person behind you. So there's this peer-driven modality that allows people to teach each other and hold each other accountable and just practice doing the next right thing day after, literally minute after minute, then day after day, then week after week, and month after month, until those behaviors and doing the right thing just becomes a part of who you are. And I've seen it firsthand, having lived and worked and learned in three different therapeutic communities, first as a student and then later as an administrator or staff person. I've seen remarkable success. And I think the most important thing about the therapeutic community model, well, there's two things that I think are really important. In the therapeutic community model, nobody is treated like a victim or a patient. The whole "is addiction a disease" question isn't really even contemplated, because the thought is that whether or not addiction is a disease is kind of irrelevant, because even if it's not your fault, it's still your responsibility. That's the first thing. So you're held accountable as an adult with free will, and you're not excused as a victim or a patient because of your disease. Poor thing, you're addicted, you can't help yourself. That excuse is not there, because I know from experience, personal experience, and having been in that environment for almost 20 years, is that a drug addict, because we're all master manipulators, you learn it at an early age because you have to survive. You have to keep the secrets. You have to keep your family, then your wife, then your employer, everybody from knowing who you really are and what you're really up to in the bathroom every 20 minutes. You become a master manipulator. And so if you allow me the excuse that addiction is a disease and it's not my fault and you poor thing, I'm going to be like, yeah, that's right. See, it's not my fault. Here, feel sorry for me. Give me an excuse to not succeed. Well, that's what we'll do. So I think the fact that a therapeutic community doesn't allow you to play the victim or the patient role is instrumental in why it's so successful. And then also, I think the therapeutic community model, because it is not defined by 30 or 60 or 90 days or 6 months or whatever it is, in the therapeutic community model, you are allowed to stay there as long as you need to before you feel like you can leave. And I think that is the single biggest difference between the therapeutic community model and traditional modalities of treating addiction in our country that allows for such great success. And
Yeah.
I want to say, as we go through this conversation, obviously, I'm a great advocate for the therapeutic community model. As I told you when you first approached me, that's why I wanted to come on. Not so much to talk about me. My story is not that great. It's not nearly as exciting as some other stories. I didn't overcome nearly as much as other people I know in this business. So I'm pretty, just plain vanilla, drug addict. But the therapeutic community model that saved my life, that's what we should be talking about. Not me, we meaning just you and me, but everybody in the recovery community, because the success rate is undeniably unsurpassed in any other method of treatment. Lots of treatment programs will get excited if they have a 10% success rate. And a therapeutic community model, generally speaking, has a 50% success rate, and that's with just 2 years. If you stay 3 years, it's generally accepted that the success rate, generally defined as not, using drugs or becoming unemployed or getting arrested within 5 years, is 75%. And if you stay 4 years or longer, it's literally 80 or 90%, which is just phenomenal.
Well, it's numbers. If I can interrupt you for a second, Alan, it's numbers that's unheard of. I mean, really, because I've in the little over the 3 years I've been in the addiction, or let's not put it a different way, the recovery community, I have learned so much. And I may upset some people by saying this, but this is what podcasts are all about. And this is just my version of it. 80% of the recovery centers out there, I think, are just bogus. I think they're just a revolving ATM. They're not there for the individuals. Now, again, this is just my version. Okay. I'm not putting names out there of which ones I think, because that doesn't matter. What I love about the model that you're talking about, the addiction's thrown out the door. If I understand properly, it's thrown completely out the door. And you allow a person to start digging deep. It's like if you got a sliver that's really deep and it just irritates the living shit out of you, you actually help give them that needle to start digging it out, to start getting it to where it's going to get out of your skin, so it's not festering and causing infection, and it feels so much better. I was at an event speaking in Park City yesterday. I had the honor of being asked, and I was up there doing a presentation and had 30 minutes to share some stuff. And we opened it up to Q&A afterwards. And this gal, who is 2 years in recovery right now, said when she went to this therapist that she was meeting with, it was the only therapist she went to that said, "We're not here to talk about your addiction. We're here to talk about you." And she goes, that changed her frickin' life immediately. And that's exactly what this TC model does.
I agree. And I want to back up before I kind of sidetrack myself, which is easy to do because so much of this is just swimming around in my mind all the time. And I'm, so anxious to let more of the world know that TC models out there, that they exist, that the help is there. And we're very fortunate in Salt Lake City to have 2 really good exemplary TCs. I mean, there's only a handful of them across the country, and Salt Lake City has 2. And I just think that's, just fantastic. But I want to make it very clear. I'm a real critic of the treatment industry, of the rehab industry, but not the people that work there. In my 20 years almost in this business, it's been my experience that most of the practitioners, most of the employees, most of the staff, most of the people that are in this business are well-intentioned. Their heart is in it. I mean, they're certainly not in it for the money, but they're in it because their heart is there to help people. So this is not an indictment of the people in the business.
Correct.
It's an indictment of the model. And what I mean by that is that the system is built around funding instead of the benefit of the participant. You know, you're funded for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or 6 months, or there's a point when your insurance or mommy and daddy's money runs out and you have to be miraculously cured on that day because you have to leave. They need the bed to put somebody else in it. And that's the travesty, in my opinion, that the whole recovery industry is built around money and funding and not the participant, except at a TC. At a therapeutic community, it's free. You don't have to pay to go there. You just have to convince someone in an interview process that you're willing to put in the hard work, sometimes the excruciatingly hard work, over a long period of time to change who you are. You know, the 30 and 60, 90-day programs, I mean, there's a benefit to them because they get people clean and sober. And you know, that's the first step. But that's all you can do in 30 or 60 or 90 days is really just get somebody clean and sober and clear-headed again. You can't really affect any change in their behavior, not long-term. You can make them aware and, like I said, get them clear-eyed again. But if nothing changes, nothing changes. And if all you do is get somebody clean and sober and then put them back out in whatever environment they came from, more often than not, they're going to eventually, you know, find a reason or an excuse to fall back into whatever that default position is that they came from. And that's why so many people go through treatment so many times. A therapeutic community is generally at least 2 years long, sometimes 2.5 or 3 years long. So that's long enough to get you clean and sober and let you practice new behaviors long enough till they become not just what you know intellectually, but who you are as a person. And that's where you're going to find success. I know that was true for me, and that was after 37 years of drug abuse and petty criminality and just lying and cheating and thieving and just living a life of mayhem and debauchery. And you're not going to fix that in 30 days. I don't care who you are.
No.
You need that kind of time. And importantly, also, I believe, Al, is that in a regular rehab, it's me, the master manipulative drug addict, and some well-intentioned clinician that maybe he's never been arrested, never even done drugs or been addicted, but's gone to school and wants to change the world and has her heart in it or his heart in it, and they want to help me, but they're kind of out of their league because I can manipulate my way through every conversation. I can get them to believe whatever I want. I can get them to give me money. I can do so many things, and they think they're helping me, but really all they're doing is feeding my manipulation and feeding my deceit. And you know, they're not really helping me. What I need is people like me and you and other people that have been there, done that. People, you know, if I've got 20 years of mayhem in my life, they've got 30. They know every lie that I'm telling. They know every game that I'm playing. They know every little slick maneuver I'm trying to get over on them, and they're not buying it. And so I can be held accountable by people that know exactly what I know and have done it longer than me, and that can look at me and go, man, sit down and shut up.
Yeah. No, it is so true. And I want to say thank you too for bringing up the people who work in these recovery centers, because there are lots of them. I've had some of them are my friends to this day. They are there for the people. It's the system that they're working in. That's exactly. So thank you for putting it that way. That was better put than the way I put it. So thank you. And what I want to add too, also with the therapeutic community is it's for everyone. You know, I lived a life of manipulation and lying. And I learned how to do that at a very young age, just so I didn't get my butt kicked or get in trouble. And I mastered it throughout me growing up into my adulthood. And for the past 15 years, I have done nothing but work on the outside of me to be who I am today. And it's almost like the therapeutic community without being in a facility where people that can help you with that. I've had to go through lots of struggles and everything to get to where I had to be to retrain my brain. When you've got someone there, well, and I've actually had people, our good friend Dave DeRocher, who's called me out on the carpet, it opens your mind. It really gets you thinking. And I'm very grateful for people like yourself and Dave and Dylan and I mean, gosh, George, so many people that I have met, especially that have come out of the Other Side Academy as well as Red Barn. Even my friend Joe, who introduced us, who have taught me some very, very valuable life lessons. And again, it all stems off of the TC model.
Well, let's go back to something you said, because I'd like to respectfully take exception with the comment you made. The TC model is not for everybody. There are certain people with mental health issues. I mean, schizophrenics, people with severe mental health issues that, probably need more attentive care than the care you can get inside of a TC. Like I said, the TC is an each one teach one model where it's all peer driven. It's like me holding the guy next to me accountable, who's holding the next guy to him accountable, who's holding the next gal next to him accountable. Everybody's holding each other accountable. But I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how to deal with a schizophrenic. And there are some people that have had such severe trauma in their life. Maybe it's sexual trauma or, just family trauma or physical trauma. And there's certain situations that I think require more specific, specialized care than the classic TC is designed to afford someone. But also, as someone who's interviewed literally thousands of people, generally in jail, for acceptance into a TC, I can tell you that in my experience, at least, maybe 10 or 15% of the people need care that a TC can't provide. The rest of them are just claiming they need care that a TC can't provide because they don't want to put up with the rigors of a TC, because they don't want to be held accountable. They don't really want to get fixed. They just want to get high. But when you finally reached a point in your life where you're just so sick of everything that drug addicted life represents, when you're like the old cliche, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, when that finally happens, then a TC is a perfect place. And like I said before, the therapeutic community is an ideal environment for just your garden variety knucklehead like me. And, I don't have schizophrenia. I don't have mental health issues to fall back on. Heck, I don't even have family trauma, sexual abuse, or any of the other things that are so common amongst our population to fall back on. I was just a spoiled ass kid that turned into a liar at a very young age, and then got used to it and just became manipulative and sneaky and duplicitous, and in that behavior that I instilled in myself when I was in junior high school, I just developed as I was in high school and became a master at it as I went into the business world, as I blew through a couple of marriages and a couple of good careers, and it just becomes part of who you are. And for a guy like that, or even people that have suffered severe traumas that aren't mental health related, or except for the fact that they are traumatic, a TC is a perfect place. So I don't know, but let's say that 7 out of 10 drug addicts running around out there currently could probably be helped by a therapeutic community as well as any other modality. And again, you're not restricted by that 30 or 60 or 90-day limit, because that's when your money runs out and you got to pack your bags and leave. You can stay 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, as long as you want. And I think it's important for the audience to know also, they say, well, if you don't get government funds and if they don't have to pay to go there, how do you pay for it? And that's a great question. And that's another reason I think the TC model is so genius, because the way it's funded is a TC will run certain businesses. You mentioned the Other Side Academy, which I think is probably the premier therapeutic community in the country now. For years, people considered Delancey Street the sort of the gold standard. And Delancey Street is certainly a model that has earned its cred over time. They've been, in business since the early 70s. And, it's the place that saved my life. So you're not going to hear anything bad about Delancey Street from me. But the Other Side Academy and Dave DeRocher, who you mentioned, he and I were at Delancey Street together. That's where we met. And Dave is certainly a powerful force in this environment. He earned his chops at Delancey Street, and that's where he got well, if you want to call it that. When we were recruited to come to Salt Lake, Dave was actually recruited by the group of philanthropists that wanted to bring a model like Delancey Street to Salt Lake, and Dave brought me along with him, and that was an honor and a great 4 years that I spent helping get that program off the ground. But I forgot what I was saying now. But
they're about the top TC in probably the nation right now.
I think that's probably a fair statement. They've taken everything that Delancey Street represented and just built on that. And they're a great organization now, and one that I was really proud to be associated with. I had another thought that I was trying to say, but maybe it'll come back.
Was it about the funding? How you can go there for free?
Yes, that's what I was saying. The funding, you don't have to have money to go there, and the businesses that the Other Side Academy or any classic TC runs, a moving company, TOSA has a storage company as well. They have a construction department. They have other enterprises. They have a couple of very successful thrift stores, which is a real stroke of genius. But those businesses are what fund the operation, what fund the organization. And so that's awesome because the participants don't have to pay to play. But what's even more ingenious and important about that is that those vocational enterprises also serve as the sort of petri dish for these broken individuals, many of which who have never had a job in their life, at least one that came with a paycheck. It's a place for them to go and get up every morning and get dressed for work, to show up on time, and you better be on time, to work hard all day, to don't get caught up to come back from break on time. Don't get caught up with your employees. Just keep a good attitude, work hard, and don't get caught up. Those very basic tenets of how to be successful in life are taught on a daily basis by these students who get assigned to these different enterprises. And again, in that each one teach one philosophy, they are brought along by people that have been doing what they're doing now just for longer. And so it's just a constant chain of teacher and student, teacher and student. One day you're the student, next day you're the teacher. One day you're the student, next day you're the teacher. And that is awesome. And to see people that have never had any success in their life, never been part of a successful team, to see them given that responsibility and to see them teach it to somebody else that can look at them and go, gosh, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. Because I knew him on the street and, he was like no good, but look at him now.
Yeah.
Or even if they didn't know them on the street, they look and they know because of groups and because of other, interactions that they have inside of that environment. They know this guy's history. They know how many times he's been to prison. They know what he's been through. And they're like, holy moly, if he can do this and he can be given that kind of responsibility and he can grow into it and handle it so successfully, maybe there's hope for me. And so all of these things are intertwined. Each one teach one, no victim, no patient mentality, learn by doing, be held accountable by your peers and called out decent by your peers when you fall short. There's no lying, there's no excusing, there's no getting away with anything in a therapeutic community. And that's where the whole person change comes in. And once you have that whole person change, the addiction side of it becomes ancillary. What comes first? Do you behave this way because you're addicted, or are you addicted because you behave this way? And I can make a compelling argument for either one. But I go back to what I said earlier, that whether or not addiction is a disease, and, we can't pick our diseases, I say it doesn't really matter, because even if it's not your fault, if it is a disease, if you want to take that side of the argument, it's still your responsibility. It's like a diabetic. You don't get to pick to be diabetic, but you better watch what you eat. You better watch your blood sugar. You better watch your insulin levels. It's your responsibility to do that. If you don't, you're going to die. And everybody just expects that diabetics to do that. Nobody thinks that's a big deal. But somehow with addiction, we give them an excuse and we pat them on the head and give them fuzzy slippers and a Kleenex and cry with them about how woe is me. Knock it off.
Yeah.
Go to work. Be responsible. Get up on time. You got to get up on time and show up booted and suited and ready to go, whether or not you're an addict. And once you take that excuse away from them, change happens.
No, and you are so right, because I've seen so much of this now in the past, like 3+ years that I've been doing this show and being out there in the community. And Dave DeRocher was a guest on my show, and he brought that up during the show, that other places talk about the students or the clients that are there. They're going, you will relapse. It's just part of the journey. You will relapse. And Dave was getting really huffy about it in the interview, which I understand why, because he goes, that's just giving them a damn excuse. They're going, well, we're going to do it anyway, so we might as well just do it, right?
He's right.
And so we're giving certain individuals an excuse, going, well, guess what? This is part of my journey. Well, how many times are you going to have that put into your journey? Because I've watched it on my own personal side of things, where it's going to happen. So it just happens. So
well, not necessarily. Doesn't
you're
have to
allowing
happen.
it to happen.
Well, and Dave's good like that, because Dave's the last person that's going to give you an excuse or a reason to fall short. I mean, he's got a big heart. He cares about you more than anybody else, but he is not going to coddle your ass. That's just not part of Dave's DNA. And he's right. When you sit around for 30 days and talk about addiction theory, relapse prevention, triggers, I mean, I don't even get it. How can you sit around for 8 hours a day in groups and talk about drugs and then not expect somebody to want to go do drugs? In a therapeutic community, you're not allowed to talk about drugs. It's an actionable offense, and you will be held accountable for it and do extra duty for doing that, because it's not about the drugs. It's about the sneakiness. It's about the manipulation. It's about the lying. It's about the low self-esteem because you do all those things. And if you just practice doing the next right thing, little baby steps, and then crawl, and then walk, and then run, if you do that and you're doing it with people on the left and right of you that are being held to the same standard, you'll eventually forget about the drugs. It's not the cause, it's the symptom. Yes. And Dave is as good as anybody I've ever met at advocating that and holding people accountable. And the Other Side Academy has a really high standard of accountability and integrity. And I just wish the whole world, Joseph Grinny, the founder of the Other Side Academy, I never forget the first time he said it. He's probably said it a million times since then, but he said, never mind drug addicts, everybody ought to have to go here. Everybody out there ought to have to go through this process. If everybody went through this process of 200% accountability and rigorous honesty and, all the other principles and tenets that are advocated at TCs, he said the whole world would be a better place. And, he's absolutely right. And, and he is he's a social scientist, and so he's a master at messaging these things, and he's written books, and he takes it out into the the normies universe. And it is kind of funny that a bunch of mistake experts and former drug addicts and criminals at the Other Side Academy can teach the whole damn world how to live their life better. And that's what the therapeutic community model is. And that's why I can sit here so excited. And it's funny because I left Red Barn about, it's between 2.5 and 3 years ago, right? And my wife and I own an estate sale company, and we've been blessed with a lot of success. And, it's funny, in thinking about being on your podcast, I was telling my wife, I said, since I left Red Barn, I've basically cut the hours I work probably in half. I've tripled my income, and that's great, right? I mean, who wouldn't love that combination? But you know what I miss every single day is the intrinsic satisfaction of watching a broken, lost life get reinvented. I don't care what business you're in, there is no other feeling that feels like watching a human's life being reinvented, watching that spark come back in their eyes, seeing them 4 or 5 years later. I mean, a lot of the people that run the Other Side Academy now were just fledgling students when I was there. And now they're running the organization. And it's just, it's miraculous. And you just want to put that on a poster and show the entire world, look, this is what's possible. And none of those people were coddled, and none of those people were allowed to have an excuse for failure. Everybody was pushed to their limits and then some. But this is the result you get. And so, that's why I think guys like you, guys like me, guys like Dave, everybody in this business should scream from the mountaintop that people should know, and people should support, and people should advocate for there to be more therapeutic communities in the United States, because that's how we're going to get ahead of this addiction crisis.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. And if I had a gavel right here, I'd be slamming it down, going,
Bam! Case closed, right?
Amen. Yeah, and all this is so true, because I went through some training to be a crisis and recovery coach, and it's all about the brain first approach. And it's to stop, it's like the Cartman's triangle. I don't know if you've heard of the Cartman triangle. I think maybe you and I touched base just a little bit on it when we had dinner. And it's about playing the victim, being the rescuer, and being the persecutor. And I tell you what, I have lived that way all my life. All my freaking life. I've played in that bottom triangle, the dreaded drama triangle. And people who come into these TC places, they're in that same way. Some of them, it's a lot larger scale than where I've came from. However, I'm still in that triangle. When we was in our training, and the teacher said, I'm going to teach you something today that's going to freaking change your life immediately. And I can get emotional talking about it sometimes, because it literally did change my life that quick, because now I can start paying attention to my own thoughts. I can start realizing when I'm starting to play that damn victim, where I'm blaming somebody else because of the way I feel. And I'm able to catch myself go, no, wait a minute. These are my feelings. They didn't do anything wrong. I'm causing my own bullshit is what's happening. And then also to where I play the rescuer or the persecutor, that triangle, these arrows, they intertwine constantly all day long. They're going every direction. And when you recognize it and learn how to work towards it, refiring those healthier neurons and binding them, that's why a program that's a 2.5-year program or a 2-year program or 3-year, you have just unplugged all those unhealthy neurons completely away and plugged new ones in and intertwined them with such healthy habits and healthy thinking. And that's why the success rate, at least for me, what I'm seeing, I think that's why the success rate is so high, because these individuals are literally changing it's like they're changing their DNA. I mean, it is completely changing.
It is. And, you've said it at sort of a collegiate level. And I tend to, talk at a high school level, and you're right. I mean, it is reprogramming your neurons, and, there's a lot going on there. But you know what? I think one of the things that we do is we make things harder than they need to be. And, where you say you're changing your neural pathways, your physiology, literally your DNA almost. And I say, hey, you're just doing the next right thing. You're just doing the next right thing and practicing that over and over. It's like muscle memory. It's like learning to shoot a free throw. You just keep practicing them and you get better and better over time, but you need somebody or something there that says, you've got to stand at this free throw line and do this for 8 hours a day, whether you like it or not. And that's what a TC does. That's why the most successful students in a TC are generally the ones that come as an alternative to going to prison. I know I can speak for myself. I would have split 10 times over from Delancey Street if I didn't know that I was going to prison for many years if I left. 2 years at Delancey Street, or 10 or 15 years or whatever it was going to be in prison. I mean, okay, that's enough to keep me anchored. I'm not stupid, 210. I'll stay here. No matter what I thought my plans were after I left there, that was the best place for me to be. But if you just stay there for that long, then you get enough practice in that it starts changing. And once the magic starts to happen, then I get a sense of self-worth, a sense of accomplishment. Then, like any good drug addict, I'm going to want more. Now I become addicted to that. And so another beautiful thing about the TC model is that it plays on the mentality of drug addicts, because a drug addict's greedy. A drug addict wants immediate gratification. A drug addict, I only want my share out. I want your share and their share. And if I can't earn it, I'll just steal it. That's how I've lived my whole life. But in a TC, you can't steal anything because there's 18 people watching every move you make. And if you do pick up anything that doesn't belong to you, they're going to call you out and you're going to be told about it 3 times a week in a group setting. Then you're going to get some extra duty for it. And it's just like, oh my God. But your brain learns over time. It's like, holy shit. Okay, this is very different than anything I've been living in. These people are all watching my ass. And if I do anything wrong, I'm going to be held accountable. So the brainstem says, well, then don't do that stuff, because it's not pleasant and you'd rather watch football on Sunday than mop floors. So don't do the dumb stuff and you don't have to pay the price. And it's really that simple. I mean, there's neurotransmitters, there's some, physiology going on, there's some deep, psychological stuff going on, but really it's just, I'd rather watch football than push a broom. And these people are all watching me. And if I don't do the right thing, I'm going to be pushing the broom instead of watching football. I pick football. And if you pick football long enough, then it becomes who you are, like I said before, instead of just what you know. There's another interesting thing about that Therapeutic Communities. Mimi Silbert, the founder, not the founder actually, but the longtime president of an angel, a literal angel on earth. She used to say, now she never say this to me personally, but legend has it, urban legend is that she used to say, it takes 4 years to rewire a brain like ours, but you can't get a drug addict to commit to anything for 4 years. You can barely get them to commit to 2. But if you can get them to commit to 2, and that's why the judicial system helps, because when they say, all right, go to TOSA for 2 years, or go to Red Barn for 2 years, or go to prison for 6, most selfish drug addicts will pick the lower number, and they're not really interested in change. They're just interested in, a lesser obligation so they can go back to whatever the hell they were doing before. But you get them in there for 2. If Mimi used to say, if all we accomplish in the first 2 years of you being here is that you should stay 1 more, then we've done our job. The first 2 years, I used to tell the students, you get to learn what we do. The 3rd year is when it becomes who you are. And just about anybody can do 2 years, because if you're facing a 10-year beef and you know that all you have to do is get through 2 or 2.5 years at TOSA, whatever the obligation is now. If I finish this, I don't have to go do my prison beef. Anybody can stay then. That's just more selfish drug addict behavior. But if you stay a 3rd year and now that obligation to the state is over, you can leave anytime you want, you can get pissed off and walk out, but there's no consequence, and you still stay. When you get 2 hours of community service because you did something wrong and you disagree with it, and it wasn't you, it was the other guy, and whatever stories we all tell ourselves, but you stay anyway and do a penalty that you don't even think you owned, and you get through that, that's when the change occurs. That's when you steal the character that's going to last you a lifetime. When you can put up with life that's unfair, when you can pay consequences that you really shouldn't have to pay. They were the other guy's payment and you made it anyway. When you can do that, then you can succeed in life. And that's why I think the third year, is so important. When you stay beyond the state's obligation or your obligation to the state, and you stay there just because you want to be a better human, that's when the real magic happens. And that's what I was talking about before, that is so gratifying to watch. And it's the thing about that recovery industry that I miss every day, is watching men and women become somebody that they've never known, and then be proud of it. And then once they get a taste of it, they become a force to be reckoned with. Like so many of the people that you talked about, you were rattling off names, Dylan and Robin and Matt and Diego and, and Dave and, everybody down at the Other Side Academy. And there's people just like that up at Red Barn as well. To see them be who they are now compared to how I used to know them, 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was, is just remarkable. And no business, no amount of money, no amount of time off can replace that feeling that you get from being close to that.
No, there's not, I interviewed Clay, who is at TOSA as well. I love the kid, man. Anybody that's under 50 is a kid to me anymore. So,
Yeah, I hear you.
And I remember he goes, what I do now is my new high. That is literally my new drug. And it's exactly what you just spoke about, Alan. It's about seeing someone's light where it came in, it was barely flickering. And to see that flame growing, I've only been a crisis and recovery coach for a very short time. I'm still getting my legs underneath me and still kind of molding everything together. And I have a client, and it was about a week ago, and I'm sitting down with this individual, and matter of fact, I was talking about the Cartman Triangle. I was talking about the victim and the rescuer and the persecutor. And watching the expressions on her face, to see a whole different world, reminded me of my first granddaughter. My daughter took a picture of her at a sliding glass window by a patio, her hands pressed up against the glass. She's standing up and she's got her face looking like this, and she's watching it snow. Her first sight of a snowstorm, and the look that little girl had on her face of this amazement of what is this amazing stuff that's falling out of the sky. I saw that in this client. It's just like this whole new world, like you said, opens up of something that it's always been there. It's always been there. It's just that they were so caught up, as I like to say, looking at the world through a straw. It wasn't giving them that opportunity. And people like everyone that works at the staff at TOSA and Red Barn and even other facilities, yourself, who help set out the breadcrumbs really to where these individuals start really opening their mind. And it's like this whole new little kid comes out of them. And it is such a freaking great feeling to feel when you just helped an individual, even if it was only this much that day.
It's funny when you're saying that, Al. What came to my mind is the bench. The bench is a symbol at a TC. It's usually placed somewhere near the front door. It's metaphorically referred to as the portal between your old life and your new one. When you come in, whether you get picked up and brought from jail, whether you come in off the street, you're asked to take a seat on the bench, and you'll be left there for a while. And based on the interviewer, the staff, whoever is, interacting with this person, you size up pretty quick what level of knucklehead they are. Is this a 1? This guy's going to be pretty reasonable, or this guy's a total 10. He's going to be completely obnoxious and combatant and, intransigent to any kind of, suggestion of change. And the guy that's going to be least resistant, maybe you leave him sit there for an hour just so he can kind of observe what's going on and kind of see what kind of place it is, and then you take him in and give him his interview. The other guy, you might leave him sit there for 24 hours just to make sure he wants it and to let him know that he's not in charge. And then you bring them in and you let them sort of put their hands up against the glass and see the snowstorm for the first time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, there's there's great power in that metaphor. And the bench is also a disciplinary tool. And all of us are so used to lying, and we don't even know where the truth stops and the lies begin. You just say whatever you need to say. It comes out of your mouth just to protect whatever you're up to at the time, which is usually not honorable. That's the drug addict life, right? Well, the therapeutic community model, like I said, you got a million eyeballs around you all the time. You're not going to get away with anything. You're just not, no matter how slick you think you are. And then when you get called on it, 9 out of 10 times the person will deny it. They got the cookie in their pocket, but they'll swear they didn't put the cookie there. It's not my cookie. Heck, these aren't even my pants. That's the kind of stuff that people will say. And you get your ass put back on the bench, and you'll sit there until you admit, yes, those are my pants, but it wasn't my cookie, but I did take it. And for some people, that takes an hour. I've seen people sit on a bench for 3, even 4 days before they would admit that. But here's the thing. When somebody that's made a life out of lying and has been allowed to get away with it by their parents, by the system, by those therapists that I was telling you about that are kind of out of their league when it comes to masterful manipulators like I used to be, like maybe you used to be, like most of us used to be, when they finally break down, when they finally are just too tired to lie, too tired to fight, and they say, yeah, I took the cookie. That's the magic moment. I think of one person in particular at Red Barn, and strong guy, big guy, big guy. He runs the place now. He runs the whole business side of Red Barn, and he was that guy, just proud as he could be, completely full of shit, but just would ride it till the wheels fell off. Whatever lie, whatever story, he just wouldn't break. In a group setting, they call it different things. They used to call it games, and now they call it breakthroughs, or just it's a therapeutic group, where people get held accountable.
I've been a part of that. They did that to me when I went and spoke, just to give me a taste of what they do. And I didn't do any of those things, and I still had beads of sweat forming up on my forehead.
Yeah. And let me tell you something. What they did for you was a mock game. They sort of faked it. They played like that's not they can try all they want, but that's not the same. When it's real, it's different. Whatever you saw, multiply that by 10. That's what a real game is. And this one gentleman, his first name's Jeff. And I'll never forget, big 260-pound tough guy Jeff, in the middle of a game, he finally let go. And then he just started crying, just kind of sobbing. And that went on for 15 minutes. And that was the moment that changed his life. He never looked back. He had a completely different look on his face. It's finally when you let go and just agree to be honest, no matter how it makes you look. There's such freedom and liberation in that. That's one of those aha moments, that just, that's when that life changes. Again, that's what I was talking about before, being witness to that, being a part of that, being one of the guys that was yelling at Jeff in that game last night about whatever it was, I don't remember, but him finally just saying, yeah, I did that, or yeah, that's me, or whatever it was. And that was his moment. And everybody has one of those. It's when you let go of the old image, when you let go of, it's the difference between reputation and character. All of us come in, that's why drug addicts go to jail and they always do 1 million push-ups a day. And that's why when they're out on the street, they got a gold chain and the Air Jordans and, clothes are so important because they feel so shitty inside about who they are. They got to dress good on the outside to make up for it. They feel so shitty about who they are when they're on the outside because they're all sucked up and, smoking crack all day. They go into jail and get clean and they, want to get back in shape. And then they usually go out and do it again. When you take all those accoutrements away, when you take all that facade away and you just are who you are, like Jeff was that night in that game, that's when change really happens. And those are the moments that everybody gets to witness each other have. And then that just strengthens their resolve to have more of it. And that's what's so important about the TC model. It's not just a therapist or a doctor that's there to fix the poor, broken drug addict. It's a whole bunch of other students that are equally as broken or equally as well, but they're all there for the same intention, to try to leave a law-abiding, honest, orderly life. And when they see each other have those breakthrough moments, it makes them want to have theirs. Again, it's the drug addict mentality. If he's got some, I want some too. Before they got there, it was crack or meth. After they get there, especially after they've been there a while, they see a big old tough guy, like Jeff, break down and have his moment. They want what Jeff has. They want to be as vulnerable and courageous as Jeff so they can have what Jeff has. And so it's that synergy that's involved in each person getting well and doing better, and just feeding that around that circle of chairs of people in those groups. Everybody wants more of the same. So it feeds off itself. And to be one of the people that's there to gently sort of guide that process is, like I said, not like any other thing I've ever felt.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's been hard for me in some of the state, because I have a really soft heart, but I'm learning. I've learned a lot from Dave, and just in the short period of time that you and I have known each other, I've learned a lot from you. I watched a video that Dave did. I think he was talking out at one of the prisons, and he said something like, how many of you guys think you're a good dad, or something like that. And he looked at one guy in the audience and he says, you're a good dad, so what the hell are you doing in here? Yeah. And it's just that bluntness, right? And again, however, you and him and so many others, it comes from the heart. They're not doing it to be pissy and ignorant and ruthless. They're doing it from a heart to get you to open your mind. And
Exactly.
by learning this, I've had someone that I've been on the phone with quite a bit, who his ex-wife reached out to me, was telling me what was going on. I said, if he would like to speak with me, give him my phone number. I'll leave it up to him, because I won't call him. He can call me if he wants to talk to me. He did call me. And as we started carrying on our conversations throughout the week, it finally got to the point where I said, can I speak openly? And he goes, yeah, go ahead. And I said, you're nothing but full of fucking excuses. And I said, I says, a week ago, you're telling me that you want to off yourself because you can't deal with life anymore. And I was really hoping to lead him into a program like TOSA. And he was like, well, I cannot see my kids for 2.5 years. That's just no way that's going to be possible. Oh, okay. And then in the next time it was, well, I can't do it because I got a job opportunity that's next week, and I could really make some money. No, can't. Well, I can't ask my mom and dad to pay my bills for me while I'm in here doing this program. Or I can't do this. And so I finally called him out on it. And I said, you're talking about you're not being able to see your kids for 2.5 years, but a week ago you're talking about offing yourself.
Right.
So
Well,
where this makes sense, and being able to be that blunt and asked to speak openly, it's things that I have learned from Dave and yourself and other individuals to get people to open their minds a little bit. And
well,
unless I'm seeing it wrong.
No, you're not seeing it wrong. And it gets back to what I was saying. That's just manipulation on that guy's part. And the kids thing is really interesting. And I got 2 points to make about that. The reason that guy, anytime you do an interview with somebody, to go to TOSA, to go to Red Barn, to go to a TC, to accept them into your program, one of the trick questions I always used was about their kids, because I already knew what they were going to say. Every drug addict, when you say, you have any kids? Yeah, I got 3 of them. How old are they? 2, 4, and 5. Really? Do you love your kids? And that's a trick question, because, oh, I love them with all my heart. Huh. Okay, so I'm confused. I must have missed something. Let me back up here. It says 3 kids, 2, 3, and 5 years old. But earlier I asked you how many times you've been to jail, and it looks like you've been incarcerated essentially 4 out of the last 6 years. So you basically haven't even seen the youngest 2, and been only around for 2 years of the 6 that your oldest son has been alive. So if that's how you love somebody, how the hell would you treat them if you didn't love them? and that catches them off guard. You don't love your kids. You just say that so you can sleep at night. You've smoked their Christmas presents. You've cheated on their mom. You've gone out at night to chase drugs, crime, or women while they're at home when you could have been reading them Dr. Seuss before they go to bed. You don't love them. The only person you love is yourself. And then one of two things happens. They either slam the phone down and flip you off and tell the guard they're done. And, that's okay. They weren't going to make it anyway at TOSA. Or the lip will start to quiver. A tear will well up in their eye. And I loved when I saw that. Because you know what that told me, Al? That told me there was still a flicker in there, a soul that we could nurture, that we could grow. He didn't love his kids. He didn't know how to love his kids. I wasn't mad at him. I get it. I've seen it 1,000 times. But we'll bring you there and teach you how to love yourself, teach you how to be a good human, teach you how to be of service to other people, put yourself last for once in your life and put everything and everybody around you first. Then you have a chance of loving your kids. It's another thing about the TC model, and I've seen, but I have a unique distinction. I've never met anybody else that has lived, learned, and worked in 3 different therapeutic communities. I mean, maybe they're out there, but I don't know. I mean, it's been a really an honor for me to Delancey Street and then the Other Side Academy. And then when I was recruited to go up and hopefully replicate the same success at Red Barn that we did at TOSA, I got to, live in 3 different TCs, and they were all very different. And it taught me a lot. Delancey Street was hardcore. Now, Delancey Street's been around since the early 70s. So it was guys, almost all of them had been in prison a long time. Most of them were hardcore heroin addicts. It was there was no little Johnny that just had a pot problem, back in Delancey Street in the day. It was hardened convicts. And so it was raw. It was in your face. Even when I was there, starting in 2006, it was still really raw, really harsh. I look back now and I realize just how brutal it was. And I get why you can't really do that now, because times have changed, the participants have changed, society has changed. But I'm glad it was still that way when I was there, because that's what I needed. You can't really motivate me with a feather. I'm more of a guy that needs a 2x4 squarely across the forehead. And that's what I got. I got my ass handed to me every day for a couple of years. I stayed 6 years, but for a long time, I needed that. And I couldn't leave because, like I said, I had a long time to go do in prison. And so I wasn't going to leave no matter what. But many nights I went to bed with a lump in my throat or cried myself to sleep. And that was just the transformation. That was those neurotransmitters rewiring themselves, because I was finally having to admit I was basically a piece of shit. Even though I said I love my kids, even though I said I was a good person, I just had bad luck. It's not my fault. I'm an addict. It's a disease. All that nonsense. I was still sort of playing those tapes, but they wouldn't let me. They made me look in the mirror. As ugly as it was, every day that mirror got held up to me until I finally had my moment, like Jeffrey in that game. I finally had my moment where I surrendered. And then I said, okay, please help me. Please, you guys, help me. And everybody gets to that. And when you see big, tough men basically crumble in front of you and ask for help, then you know you're doing something right. And then the community will rally around them. And then the other people that aren't yet brave enough to be that vulnerable, they see it in whoever does it. And then it gives them permission to do the same thing. But getting back to what you're talking about, kids, it's a great example of the different TCs I was at. Delancey Street was real raw and, like brutal. You just got the shit beat out of you all day, every day until you change. That was the MO. TOSA, we had a pretty good sized staff even when we got there. And for a while, there was like more staff people. We had 6 staff members and 2 students when it started. And that was kind of weird. But anyway, they're very staff heavy. And I think that's awesome. And because of where we came from at Delancey Street, where people had to wait a long, long time for any sort of acknowledgement, for any sort of positions, for any sort of sense of authority. And it taught, because drug addicts are all about immediate gratification. So having to wait for everything long past you were probably qualified to have that thing or that position or that authority, taught discipline, and it taught patience. It sort of eliminated that sort of sense of immediate gratification that's inherent in drug addicts generally. And so that was good thing. When I went to Red Barn, there was no other staff. It was just me. And so I had to pluck from the student body, who I thought the leaders were, and sort of make them, create pseudo staff, if you will, because I didn't have any other choice. And what I learned from that is that the students in a therapeutic community, they don't have to wait 3 years for a certain thing or 4 years for a certain thing. If you give it to them in 6 months or 12 months, they don't know the difference. They just know what your expectations are. And my experience was they fulfilled those expectations. They rose to the occasion. And that was a really interesting thing for me, to go from Delancey Street, then to the Other Side Academy, and then to Red Barn, and see that time wasn't as important a motivator as leadership was really interesting. And getting back to what you said about kids, I think I could argue either side of it, right? I can argue that for the first 2.5 years that you're, at a therapeutic community, you shouldn't see your kids because you're a shitty parent anyway. You were probably a detriment to your kids. I mean, who wants to have their kids come see them in jail? And how selfish of you to do that anyway. As Dave used to fondly say, little Johnny goes to see his dad through the glass. Then he goes to school and thinks his dad's cool. What's he going to grow up to be? His dad. And that's the exact opposite of what we want. Dave brings up a really good point when he says that. And unless he's changed his opinions, back when I was still there, he was a strong advocate for not seeing your kids for a long time. Fix yourself first. The kids will be there when you are, when you're not going to leave them again. Because every time you get out of jail, you always tell the kids, I'm never going to do it again. You tell your wife, I'm sorry, honey, I'm going to fly straight this time, until you go back to jail. And you break their heart a little bit at a time, 100 times in a row. So making them stay away from their kids, there's an argument for that. At Red Barn, they let you see your kids a lot sooner. The argument there is, let them see their kids while they're in a protected environment, because they're probably going to screw it up. They're probably going to have emotions around it. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be different than what they've been doing. So if you let them see their kids early in their stay, within the first year, you've got a whole year of them being able to practice relating to their kids, or relating to their, girlfriend, or whatever it is, whatever your visitation rules are. Let them practice those visits, that connection, while they're still in that safe environment. So when it messes them up, you've got time to coach and counsel them through it. So I've seen both ends of that. And I think there's a strong argument to be made for either way. The point being, you just got to be true to your system, and you've got to make sure that they benefit from what that system gives them, a sense of patience and earning it, or a sense of practice, and efficacy, before you have to go back out into the big bad world and, go from 0 to 60 in 30 seconds. One of the things I think TOSA's done that is masterful, and I credit Dave and Joseph, well, their whole staff really, for this, is they've learned over time. They, had a 2-year program. Now that you have another 6 months on it, it's kind of like the reintegration phase, and you live on campus housing, and you go to work for a real job, but you still live on site, on campus, and you still have obligations like you're still a quasi student. It's sort of a half step out into the big bad world, instead of just, jumping with your eyes closed, which is what used to happen. And I'm sure that they've realized an increase in their success rate because of that gradual, reintegration into society. I think that's smart. And TOSA spares no expense in allowing their students to have that ability. Heck, I think now they even give them cars to drive for that 6 months before they have to take on the financial obligation of their own. They still get to, live like normal while they're practicing, and then they finally graduate at the end and go on with their life.
Yeah. And what I also love about the program too is, while they're working, money's being put away. So when that time comes, if it does come and they decide to pull away from there, whether it's after the 2.5 years or 5.5 years, 6 years, however long they decide, they've already got a means to start living, right? It's just not being like with other places, you finish your 30, 60, 90, or 6 months, you're right back, as you mentioned earlier in the show, you're right back in the same environment that you was in before, in all honesty, for most
Yeah,
people. So
or you
they just,
can't go back to your old
or you
environment
can. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're a felon, you can't rent an apartment, or if you can rent an apartment, it's in a shitty drug infested part of the neighborhood. And I mean, I just think what TOSA's doing is really well thought out, and that they help their students. That you go into that 6-month reintegration phase or whatever they call it. You've got a regular job, you're saving money, you're paying your bills. Some people have restitution to make. You've got a car, you're practicing going to work, coming home, going to work, coming home, getting a good night's sleep, getting up and doing it again, all that quote normal stuff, so that when you finally do have to make that leap, it's not a leap, it's just a step. And you just get up the next morning and go to work like you did yesterday, but now you're on your own and you're driving your own car. And so I just think that's awesome.
Yeah, I do too. Well, Alan, gosh, man, we've gone over an hour. It's amazing how quick these shows go, especially when you're talking about really good subject, and I just want to say thank you, man, with everything for talking about the TC model, because again, I've become a big advocate of it. I'm a true believer. I've seen it. I've met so many people who have gone through the program. I've seen where their lives are at today. I mean, gosh, Matthew and Robin just opened up their own business, and Matthew was kind of like one of Dave's right hand man, if I understood that right. And he kind of felt bad from what I was talking to him about leaving Dave. And Dave says, this is exactly why we do what we do, to give you these opportunities. And it's so cool to see the success. And I love the whole concept of the model, the TC model, the therapeutic community.
I haven't talked to Dave in a long time, but I guarantee you that what Dave's thinking with Matthew is, first of all, he's earned it, he's deserved it. He's a motorcycle monkey anyway, and he's now doing what he loves, and his wife loves it too. She's as good a motorcycle rider as anybody I know, and but Dave is not lost on the fact. I guarantee you that the example that Matthew Sims, coming to TOSA for as long as he was there, working for TOSA for as long as he did, and then going back out and chasing his dreams and building his life with his wife, he's right. That's exactly what we do this kind of thing for. That's exactly why TOSA is there. So Matthew now, in his absence, is probably the best example for the students that he's ever been.
Yeah.
And so that's the beauty in it. It's like I said before, wow, if he can do that, maybe I can too. And that's what Each One Teach One is all about. You've been told your whole life that you're a hopeless drug addict, that you're never going to amount to anything. You don't feel good about yourself because you lost your kids, you lost your wife, your mom won't let you in the house, you certainly won't leave her purse on the table when you're there. All those things happen to all of us. And to come back from that to being a business owner and a happily married man and a stellar example for hundreds of people, I mean, that's quite a journey. And Matthew's not the only one. TOSA has a whole bunch of guys that represent that sort of transformation and set that kind of example. And so does Red Barn. And like I said earlier, the fact that I don't know, your audience is probably all over the world, but the fact that Salt Lake City has, 2 therapeutic communities that are both sound, successful organizations is really, such a gift to this community. And that's why I wanted to come on today, so that maybe somebody out there will see this. And, when they get to the point where they want help and they quit making excuses, like that guy you were talking about, when they quit making excuses and realize that a 2 or 2.5 year investment in their life now will allow them to be the father they want to think they are, allow them to have that job or career that they're never going to hang on to now, even if they get the chance. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. Mm-hmm. Maybe somebody will listen to this program that you and I did today and decide to go take a seat on the bench and invest a couple of years in reinventing their life. I know now with 20 years of sobriety under my belt, and I couldn't do it by myself. I can't take credit for being that strong. I had to have an empathetic judge send my punk ass to Delancey Street. And thank God he did, because if he didn't, I probably wouldn't be alive now. And so, if anybody's grateful, it's me.
Well, again, Alan, yeah, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And we talked a lot about TOSA and Red Barn, and I just want to say thank you to Dave DeRocher and his whole staff and team, and same with Michael Haas out there at Red Barn. Same with him and his whole staff and team. Amazing, amazing individuals, great organizations, and I'm with you guys 100%. More of these need to start popping up. And I really do believe this is just the start. Who knows? Maybe a graduate from one of these facilities will end up taking their dream of wanting to do the same thing and open one up somewhere else. You never know, because that seems to be what happens, like you mentioned many times throughout the show, because we definitely need more of them. We cannot, I'll take a page out of what Dave said. We cannot allow the insurance companies to control what happens with our loved ones' lives when it comes to going through recovery, because they're the ones that determine how long someone stays. When you've got an outfit and organizations like the TC program, like you said, I mean, I was talking to a guy at where was it? He's out of TOSA. Matter of fact, I think it was at Matt and Robin's ribbon cutting. He's been there 8 years. 8 years he's been there, and he loves it. It could be a guy like that can go, you know what, I'm going to open up my own facility. It's possible.
Yeah, and I've heard people criticize the TC model, and they say, well, yeah, but after a certain amount of time, you're just hiding from real life when you live in the bubble like that. And all right, I can see how an uninformed person might have that opinion, but I know some of those people that have been heck, I was at Delancey Street for 6 years. I think Dave was there for 8.5. That's a long time. But when you find gratification in helping others, that's part of what you go there to learn. You've been such a selfish SOB your entire life. And then when you make your life about giving back to everybody around you, make it less about you and more about them. And you're doing it, as a student without a paycheck. And even if you work there with the paycheck, you're still having an impact on, probably countless lives, probably more than you even realize. And there is nothing about that is hiding. That's really taking a step into a problem and just giving yourself to help solve it because somebody helped you. I say all the time, back when I was a hot mess, there were people that invested a lot of time and energy in me, and I was not an easy investment. And so it was an honor for me to do the same thing for some of the very people that we've talked about today, and now they're doing it for more people. And that's what Each One Teach One is all about. And thank you for having me on today. It's been fun talking.
Absolutely. Again, yeah, thank you for your time. Is there any last thing you'd like to share with our listeners before we sign off, Alan?
No, I'd say if anybody sees this and in their heart of hearts, they know their life is a hot mess. They know that, they're just white knuckling it. And they're, if every single day is a struggle, if just staying clean and sober occupies 80% of your mental capacity, let it go, man. Go put your ass on the bench at one of these two great places in Salt Lake City, get an interview, invest a couple of years in reinventing your life. And if you do it with vigor, if you do it with the same sort of, enthusiasm that you used to chase the bad stuff with, if you chase the good stuff for a couple of years with that same vigor, you'll never look back. That's worth it.
Amen. I love it. Thank you for those words. Again, guys, thank you. Thank you to all our past sponsors, guest co-hosts, man, and especially thank you to all you listeners. I really do appreciate every single one of you. You guys are the ones that's making this show a success. And I am just blessed and grateful that I have you guys. So thank you again so much. And remember this, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.